7 years ago, what should have been a beautiful family trip turned into a nightmare for a mother while on a cruise ship. Her daughter and husband suddenly vanished without a trace. For years, authorities tried to uncover with upon that day, but over time hope began to fade as no new leads or suspects emerged. But then, on one fateful day years later, the mother passed by an alley in a foreign city, and what she saw in that moment would change everything. Before we dive into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from today. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. The morning sun filtered through the gray curtains of Catherine Wilson's living room, casting long shadows across the worn hardwood floor. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily, marking the passage of time. Catherine Wilson sat in her living room, her eyes fixed on Detective Mark Holloway as he delivered the news she had dreaded for 7 long years. Mrs. Wilson, Holloway began, his voice tinged with a mixture of sympathy and resignation. I'm afraid we've reached a point where we need to discuss the future of your daughter and husband's case. Catherine's heart clenched, but she forced herself to remain composed. At 46, she had aged beyond her years. The weight of her family's disappearance etched into the lines of her face. She leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "What do you mean, Detective?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Holloway sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "It's been 7 years, Mrs. Wilson. We've exhausted every lead, followed every possible trail. The case is growing cold, and we're running out of resources." Catherine shook her head vehemently, her voice rising with desperation. "No, please, Detective. You can't give up. CLA and Daniel are out there somewhere. She's 25 now. She might see one of the posters I've been putting up on the street or in the internet weekend." "Stop." Looking, her eyes moved to the family photos that adorned the walls, their smiling faces a stark contrast to the heavy atmosphere that permeated the room. The detective's eyes softened with compassion. "I understand your persistence, Mrs. Wilson, but you have to understand our position. Over the years, we've received countless false leads and spam calls. Each one takes time and resources to investigate, and it's taking away from Mothra active cases." Catherine's gaze fell to the coffee table, where a thick folder lay, a pen filled with old evidence and reports. She reached out her fingers, brushing against the worn edges of the papers. "We've come so far," she murmured. "We can't let all this work go." Toast Holloway leaned back in his chair, his expression grave. "Can you walk me through what happened that day one more time? Sometimes revisiting the details can spark new insights." Catherine nodded, taking a deep breath. She told this story countless times to police, to reporters, to well-meaning friends and neighbors. Each retelling was like reliving the nightmare, but she clung to the hope that someday, somehow, it would lead to answers. "We were on a Caribbean cruise," began her voice, distant as she recalled the events of that fateful day. "It was supposed to be a wonderful familiar vacation, something we'd been planning for years." She paused. Her eyes, unfocusing lost herself in the memory. The sound of seagulls and the smell of salt air seemed to fill the room. A ghost of that last happy day. We had docked in Curaçao, one of the stops along our route through the Dutch Caribbean. Daniel and I sat at a small cafe near the port. The tables were arranged along the cobblestone street. I remember the vibrant, colorful buildings all around us. It felt like a scene straight out of a postcard. Catherine's voice cracked slightly as she continued. "CLA, she wanted to take a short walk alone. She was 18, and we thought it would be safe. The sun was shining. There were people everywhere. How could we have known?" Holloway nodded encouragingly, jotting down notes as Catherine spoke, his pen against the paper, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet room. By the time we finished our drinks, about 15 minutes had passed, and we were ready to head somewhere else. Daniel told me he was going to look for CLA while I paid the cashier. She still hadn't come back. I saw him walk out of the cafe trying to make a phone call. I assumed it was to CLA, but Daniel, he never came back either. I searched for them around the beach and market area until evening. It had been about 2 to 3 hours since I had last seen him, right up until the ship was supposed to depart. I tried to reach them both, but none of them picked up my call. When I realized they were both gone, I reported it to the crew security. Catherine's hands trembled as she recalled the panic of that moment. They searched the ship, questioned passengers, but there was no trace of Claire or Daniel. It was as if they had simply vanished into thin air. The crew's management told me to board the ship so we could continue the discussion. Inside, they promised to contact the Curragh authorities, but I was terrified of leaving them behind on Iceland. Holloway's brow furrowed as he considered the information. The jurisdictional issues certainly completed, matters with the ship in international waters and the disappearance occurring on a foreign island. The response was slower than it should have been. He pulled out a document. From his briefcase, the paper, crisp and official-looking. We've been in close contact with Dutch authorities and Interpol all these years. Claire and Daniel's details are in Interpol's database flagged. High priority. Catherine leaned forward, a flicker of hope in her eyes. So they're still actively searching. Holloway hesitated, choosing his words carefully. I have to be honest with you. Amsterdam Interpol has lowered the case's priority. Mrs. Wilson, this is what I came here to tell you. Without new lead sources have shifted elsewhere, cases like this, they become more challenging to solve with each passing year. They alert us. If any new information comes to light, the hope in Catherine's eyes dimmed, but didn't extinguish entirely. Straightened her back, her voice taking on a determined edge. I'll pay more for the investigation, she'll say, whatever it takes. Just please don't let the case go cold. Holloway shook his head gently, his expression softening with sympathy. It's not about money, Mrs. Wilson. We've done everything we can, but we have to prioritize our resources. And after 7 years, but how can they find my family if they don't actively search for them? Catherine interrupted, her voice rising with frustration. Calm facade she had fought to maintain began to crack, exposing the raw pain beneath. The detective stood gathering his papers, a movement that seemed to signal the end of their meeting, and with it the fading of another thread of hope. I promise you, Mrs. Wilson, even though Interpol in Amsterdam has lower Reth Kaz's priority, my team here in Orlando will keep an eye out. If anyone comes forward with information, we'll follow up immediately. I'll give it another year of active searching. But after Thady trailed off, leaving the harsh reality unspoken, as Holloway prepared to leave, he turned back to Catherine, his expression softening. Stay strong, Mrs. Wilson. We're doing everything we can. Give up hope yet. With those final words, the detective exed himself. Catherine remained seated, surrounded by the remnants of her shattered family and the fading hope off there. Returned. The ticking of the clock on the mantel continued, a relentless reminder of the time that had passed and the uncertain future that lay ahead. As the front door closed behind Detective Holloway, Catherine remained motionless on the couch, her gaze fixed on the stack of missing person poster sitting next to her printer. The faces of CLA and Daniel stared back at her, frozen in time, their smiles a painful reminder of happier days. With a deep breath, Catherine pushed herself to her feet. She moved to the printer and gathered the posters, sliding them into a large manila envelope. The routine was familiar, almost comforting. In its repetition, how many times had she done this over the years? How many posters had she hung? How many she approached with her story? She grabbed her bag and phone, pausing only to check her reflection. In the hallway mirror, the woman staring back at her looked tired, worn by years of uncertainty and grief. Gray streaked her once golden hair and lines creased the corners of her eyes and mouth. Catherine stepped out into the warm Florida morning. The humidity beginning to build, she climbed into her car, the familiar leather seats offering little comfort. As she settled in, her eyes were drawn to the photograph tucked into the sun visor, a snapshot of happier times capturing her. CLA and Daniel on the deck of the cruise ship, their faces owl-light with excitement for the adventure ahead. The sight of the photo triggered a maelstrom of emotions within Catherine. Anger, grief, and a profound sense of loss crashed over her like a tidal wave. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles turning white as she struggled to contain the turmoil within. Suddenly, the dam broke. A primal scream tore from Catherine's throat as she pounded her fists against the steering wheel. Tears streamed down her face, years of pent-up anguish pouring out in a torrent of roar. Emotionally, she sobbed, her voice hurrah and broken. Why did we have to go on that damn cruise? We should have stayed home. You should have been safe for several minutes. Catherine let herself fall apart, allowing the grief she'd held at bay for so long to wash over her. The cruise ship, once a symbol of adventure and family bonding, had become the focal point of her hatred and regret. If only they had chosen a different vacation. If only they had stayed home. Her family would still be whole. As the storm of emotions began to subside, Catherine dabbed at her eyes, taking deep, shuddering breaths as she tried to regain her composure. Get it together, Catherine, she muttered to herself, her voice still thick with emotion. They need you to be strong. With trembling hand. She pulled out her phone and set the GPS for Tampere. It was about an hour's drive, but a change of scenery might do. her good, plus it had been a while since she last renewed the post she had put up in that area. Renewing her search, there could only increase the chances of Somia recognizing CLA or Daniel. As Catherine prepared to reverse out of her driveway, her phone suddenly came to life, the ringtone shattering. The fragile calm she had managed to rebuild the call was routed through her car's Bluetooth system, and she hesitated for a moment before answering hello. She said, her voice still slightly raspy from crying, "Is this Catherine?" Wilson, a woman's voice, isked, the accent distinctly European. "Yes, this is she," Catherine airplayed curiosity. Peaking, despite her emotional exhaustion, "Mrs. Wilson, I'm calling because I believe I've seen your daughter CLA here in Amsterdam." Catherine's heart skipped a beat, a mixture of hope and skepticism flooding her system. She had received countless calls like this over the years, each one promising a lead only to end in disappointment or worse, attempts to toss-cam her out of money. "I'm sorry," Catherine said, her tone weary and guarded, "but I don't have time or energy for jokes right now." She moved to end the call, her finger hovering over the disconnect button, but before she could hang up, the woman's voice came through again, more insistent, this time, "Please, Mrs. Wilson, listen to me. I'm not after your money. Just give me a moment of your time." Something in the woman's tone gave Catherine pause. Despite her better judgment, she found herself wanting to harm more. "All right," she said cautiously. "I'm listening, but this had better not be a prank." Call. The woman on the other end of the line took a deep breath. Before continuing, "My name is Sophia van Jk. I worked in Orlando for 6 years as an expat. I finished my project 6 months ago and returned to Amsterdam." Catherine listened intently as Sophia explained how she had seen the missing person posters countless times during her stay in Orlando, starting from when the case first went viral. The description of CLA had been seared into her memory. "When I saw her, Mrs. Wilson, it was certain it was CLA." Sophia continued, her voice filled with conviction, those striking blue eyes, the golden hair, that smile, it all matched the posters. "I'd seen Sufan." Catherine's heart raced as she processed this information. "Where did you see her?" she asked. Barely daring to hope at a bar here in Amsterdam, Sophia replied she was with Amon. Catherine's mind immediately went to Daniel. Could it be possible that they had been in Amsterdam all this time? "What one?" she asked Sophia to describe the man. Her hope faltered. "He was younger, muscular," Sophia said as Catherine absorbed this information. A whirlwind of questions and possibilities swirled in her mind. If it truly was CLA, where was Daniel? What had happened to them over the past 7 years? Despite her skepticism, Catherine couldn't ignore the spark of hope that had ignited within her. She had to persuade this lead, no matter how slim the chances might be. "Ban Jk," Catherine said, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "I need you to do something for me. If what you're saying is true, and you're serious about this, please go to the Amsterdam police station and file a report." The local police here in Orlando are connected to the Amsterdam authorities through Interpol. "If you make a report, it will be flagged and brought to their attention." Sophia's response was immediate and reassuring. "Of course, Mrs. Wilson. I meant what I said. I'll go to the police station right away." As the call was about to end, Catherine found herself asking one more question, her voice barely above a whisper. "You certain about what you saw? Because if you are, I'll fly to Amsterdam today." Sophia paused for a moment before replying, her tone warm and supportive. "I'm about 90% sure, and if you do decide to come, please reach out to me. We can meet up, and I'll be happy to help you in any way I can." With profuse thanks and a heart full of cautious hope, Catherine ended the call. She sat in her car, adrenaline coursing through her veins as she contemplated the decision before her. Part of her wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all, the idea of flying halfway across the world based on a phone call from a stranger, but another part, the part that had never given a hope of finding CLA and Daniel, was already planning the trip. As she put the car in reverse, Catherine's mind raced with possibilities. She chuckled softly, imagining the scenario of meeting this kind-hearted woman in Amsterdam, following her to a reunion with CLA, but just as quickly doubt crept in, reminding her of past disappointments. She remembered the incident 3 years ago when someone had claimed to have seen CLA in Hawaii. That wild goose chase had ended not just in heartbreak, but with Catherine becoming the victim of a robbery. Shaking her head to dispel the negative thoughts, Catherine concentrating the road ahead. The woman who had called Sophia sounded sincere, far more so than the young man from Hawaii who had reached out to her years ago. If Sophia really reported this to the Amsterdam police, there was a strong chance she wasn't lying. Her emotions were in a whirl, but Catherine knew that if she didn't take this seriously, no one else would. With Interpol lowering the priority of her case and the Orlando authorities giving it just one more year, she knew she had to give it everything she had. As she drove towards the police station, Catherine reached for her phone one summer. She dialed Detective Holloway's number, her heart pounding as she waited for him to answer. "Detective Holloway, this is Catherine Wilson. Are you at the station? I have a new lead, and we'll be there in 10 minutes. Yes, I'm on my way. I'll see you soon. Thanks." Catherine's car pulled into the parking lot of the Orlando Police Department. The tires crunching on the sun-baked asphalt, she sat for a moment, engine idling as she gathered her thoughts. The weight of the past 7 years pressed down on her shoulders, but the spark of hope ignited by Sophia's call propelled her forward with a deep breath. Catherine stepped out of her car. The Florida heat at her like a wall, the humidity clinging to her skin. She made her way into the station, the blast of air conditioning a welcome relief. The familiar scent of coffee and paper greeted her, a reminder of the countless hours she had spent here over the years, chasing leads and praying for answers. Officer Rodriguez, a fixture at the front desk, recognized her immediately. His eyes, kind but tinged with pity, met hers as he offered a sympathetic smile. "Mrs. Wilson," he said softly, "Detective Holloway is expecting you. You can go right up." Catherine nodded her thanks, her footsteps echoing in the hallway as she made her way to Holloway's office. Each step felt heavy, laden with the weight of hope and fear. In equal measure, she paused outside his door, taking a moment to compose herself. Before knocking, "Come in," Holloway's gruff voice called from inside. Catherine entered, the familiar sight of the detective's cluttered desk and the wall of case files behind him oddly comforting. Hale looked up from his computer, his expression a mixture of surprise and concern. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, gesturing for her to take a seat, "you said you had a new lead." Catherine settled into the chair across from him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to hide their trembling in the privacy of his office. Recounted the phone call from Sophia, watching as Holloway's expression shifted from skepticism to cautious interest. "A woman in Amsterdam claims to have seen Claire at a bar," Catherine neck included, her voice trembling slightly with suppressed emotion. To her surprise, Holloway's lips curved into a faint smile. "We've already received a report from the Orlando Interpol Bureau," he said, leaning back in his chair. The leather creaked softly under his weight. "They explained that the Amsterdam police had notified them, and we've been made aware of the situation. The FBI has also been confirmed." Catherine's eyes widened, her heart racing. "So it's true." Sophia reallocated reports seeing C.L. Holloway nodded, turning to his computer. The soft click off his moo filled the momentary silence as he pulled up a file. "A woman named Sophia Van Juk submitted a report to the Amsterdam police providing a detailed description of C.L.A. The name matches the woman Hokeldew, which lends some credibility to the claim." A mix of relief and anxiety washed over Catherine. She leaned forward in her seat, her voice barely above a whisper. "Wit happens now. How soon are we going to hear from them?" Again, Hale expression serious. "As we speak, the Amsterdam police are searching the area where Sophia reported seeing CLA." But Catherine paused, his tone gentle but firm. "We need to be realistic. Even if this lady's genuine, international cases are much more complex. The bureaucratic process is slower, and we're dealing with different time zones, procedures, and protocols." Catherine nodded, her mind racing ahead. "But if CLA is really there, we can't waste any time. What if I flew to Amsterdam? I could help with the search, talk to people. This woman, she said she could help me." Holloway's brow furrowed, concern evident in his eyes. "Catherine, remember what happened in Hawaii. I can't, in good conscience, encourage you to rush off based on this lead. Alone, it's dangerous, and realistically speaking, the likelihood of this actually being clearest low." Catherine felt a flicker of frustration. She understood Holloway's caution, but her maternal instinct was screaming her to act. "I know the risks, detective, but my gut is telling me this is different. I can't just sit here and do nothing." Holloway sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "I understand, Catherine. I do, but please, for your own safety, don't take any drastic measures. Let the Amsterdam police do their job. We'll update you as soon as we have any information." Catherine stood, her decision already made. Despite Holloway's warning, she made her way to the door, pausing with her hand on the handle. "Thank you, Detective Ive. I appreciate." Everything you've done before she could leave Holloway called out to her, "Catherine, please. Stay home or go put up those posters if you need to do something, but don't do anything rash. It's dangerous for your own safety." Catherine nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She left the station, the cool air inside giving way to the oppressive heat of the Florida afternoon. As she climbed back into her car, her mind was already racing with plans. She pulled out her phone, her fingers moving swiftly over the screen as she searched for flights to Amsterdam. A small voice in the back of her mind whispered that this was crazy, that she was potentially flying halfway across the world to meet a stranger based on a single phone call. But as she found a flight leaving in just 3 hours, Catherine knew she had to take the chance. With a deep breath, she booked the ticket. Then, still sitting in the parking lot of the police station, she dialed Sophia's number again. The phone rang several times before Sophia's accented voice answered. "Hello, Sophia, it's Catherine Wilson," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil of emotions inside her. "Eve booked a flight to Amsterdam. I'll arrive around 8 o'clock p.m. your time. Is there any chance we could meet?" There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, and Catherine held her breath, suddenly afraid that Sophia would back out. But the woman's warm voice came through, filled with determination. "Of course, Catherine, I'll meet you at the airport. Don't worry about the late hour. This is too important." Relief flooded through Catherine. "Thank you, Sophia. I can't tell you how much this means, Tom." As she ended the call, Catherine took a moment to center herself. She was secretly aware of how crazy this decision might seem to an outsider, flying across ocean to meet a stranger who claimed to have seen her long-lost daughter at a bar. It sounded like the plot of a suspense novel, but then again, losing her family on a cruise trip without a trace was even crazier than that. With renewed purpose, Catherine started her car and headed home. She had just a few hours to pack and get to the airport. As she drove, her mind raced with possibilities. What if this really was the lead that would bring CLA home? And if it was CLA, where was Daniel? What had happened to the mover these 7 long years? The questions swirled in her mind, but Catherine pushed them aside. Right now she needed to focus on the task at hand: pack, get to the airport, fly to Amsterdam from Sofia, and hopefully finally find the answers she'd been seeking for 7 agonizing years. As she pulled into her driveway, Catherine glanced once more at the photo her family tucked into the sun visor. "I'm coming," she whispered, her voice filled with determination. "Just hold on a little longer. I'm coming." The flight to Amsterdam was a blur of rest, anticipation for Catherine. 9 hours stretched endlessly as the plane crossed the Atlantic, each minute simultaneously dragging and rushing. Bish dozed fitfully, her dreams are jumble of hopeful reunions and crushing disappointments as the plane touched down at Amsterdam Schiphol Airport. Catherine's heart raced. The local time was 8 o'clock p.m., the evening sky already dark outside the PL's windows. She made her way through customs, the unfamiliar Dutch announcements echoing through the terminal. Catherine collected her small suitcase, packed hastily with little thought to what she might. Her mind was focused solely on the meeting ahead. She made a quick stop at a kiosk to purchase a prepaid phone plan, wanting to ensure she could reach Sophia. The arrivals hall was bustling with activity, even at this evening hour. Catherine asked the crowd, searching for a face she had never seen. She pulled out her phone, dialing Sophia's number, but the call wouldn't connect. Frowning, she tried again, wondering if there was an issue with the new SIM card. As the minutes ticked by without any sign of Sophia, doubt began to creep in. Had this all been a mistake? Another cruel prank? Catherine's mind flashed back to the incident in Hawaii, and she felt her stomach churn with anxiety. And just as she was about to give up and head to the taxi Bay Area, a voice called out behind her, Catherine Wilson." Catherine turned to see a woman approaching her. She appeared to be around Catherine's age, perhaps a few years older, with kind eyes and a warm smile. "I'm Sophia Vandage AK," the woman said, extending her hand. Relief washed over Catherine as she grasped Sophia's hand. "Thank you so much for coming," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I was beginning to think." Sophia gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Sorry, I'm late. The traffic was a nightmare, and finding part marking was impossible, but I'm here now and we'll figure this out together." As they made their way to Sophia's car in the parking basement, Sophia filled Catherine in on her background. Catherine learned that Sophia was also a mother and had spent 7 years in Orlando. working as an expat with a non-governmental organization focused on women and children's resilience after death Orlando. Project concluded she had returned to Amsterdam while I was in Orlando. Sophia explained as they settled into her car, I was separated from my husband and son here in Amsterdam, even that was difficult enough, twice a year. I would come back here to them and spend a weekend, which was really just a dabby cost of the time difference before heading back to Orlando before Monday began. She glanced at Catherine, her eyes filled with empathy. I can't imagine losing my family for 7 years. You're an incredibly strong woman, Catherine. And as they drove into the city, the lights of Amsterdam glittering in the distance, Sophia asked, where would you like to go first? I've booked a room for you at a small hotel near the bar where I saw, Catherine hesitated, torn between exhaustion and the urgent need to start searching immediately. I know it's Latesh, said slowly, but I'm not tired at all because of the time difference. Is there any chance we could go to the bar? No. Sophia nodded under understanding in her eyes. Of course, don't worry about me. I want to help you in any way I can. They drove through the city, the streets still lively despite the late hour as they neared the area where Sophia had seen CLA. Catherine's anticipation grew. The car pulled up outside a modest apartment building, just a short walk from the bar in question. This is where I've booked your room, Sophia explained. It's not fancy, but it's clean and close to where we need to. Bethy left Catherine's luggage in the car and made their way to the bar. The streets were alive with pedestrians' Thieverbrand nightlife of Amsterdam in full swing. As they neared the bar, Catherine's shirt raced in her chest, each step sending jolts of anticipation through her stomach and side. The bar was dimly lighted, filled with a low hum of conversation. Catherine's eyes darted from face to face, searching for any sign of CLA. Sophia led her to the bar, where Catherine pulled out a photograph of Cla from her bag, the same photograph that she had always kept in her car. Excuse me, she said to the bartender, her voice trembling slightly as she showed him the picture. Have you seen this woman recently? The bartender studied photo, then shook his head. I'm sorry, but the police have been asking about this girl all day. We've told them we haven't seen her. Disappointment washed over Catherine Nobit. She refused to give up hope. As they exited the bar, she noticed they were near the edge of the red light district areas, infamous neon glow visible in the distance. Sophia, noticing Catherine's gaze, gently touched her arm. Cindy, if we're going to search that area, Westhold, go to the police station first. I can help identify you as CLA's mother, which might help with the search. The red light district can be dangerous, and people there won't take kindly to us asking too many questions on our own. Catherine nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in Sophia's words. They returned to the apartment to drop off Catherine's lug and complete the check-in process. Catherine insisted on paying for her own room, thanking Sophia for handling the arrangements. Once that was done, they set out for the police station. The evening air was cool as Catherine and Sophia walked side by side, the hum of Amsterdam's vibrant streets surrounding them. The police station wasn't supposed to be a walk from where they were, but Sophia suggested they take a shortcut through three-thread light district to cut the time in half. It was a route Catherine hadn't intended to take, but with the urgency of their mission, she agreed. As they made their way through the narrow streets, the district alive with neon lights, pulse of electronic beats from nearby clubs, and the mix of languages in the air felt like an entirely different world. People meandered about, seemingly indifferent to the atmosphere, as they passed colorful windows that displayed a stark contrast to what Catherine was used to. The street was busy, but the alleyways they cut through felt quieter, more isolated. Catherine was lost in her thoughts, her footsteps quickening as she tried to ignore the discomfort that crept up in the pit of her stomach. The district felt foreign, unsettling, in a way that she couldn't shake off. Sophia walked ahead of her, and Catherine, distracted, didn't realize she was gradually falling behind. She felt the city's energy pulse, but she wasn't entirely present, her mind spinning with questions. Was CLA really here? Is she safe? What kind of life has she been living? Could they possibly be close to finding her suddenly? Sophia froze in place. Catherine didn't notice right away. Caught up in her own head, it wasn't until she heard Sophia call out to her that she stopped and turned around, realizing she had walked several meters ahead. Hey, come back, Sophia called, her voice thick with something Catherine couldn't place. Turned quickly, a twinge of guilt rising in her chest for not staying closer when she reached Sophia. She noticed the way Sophia's eyes were locked onto one of the windows down the alley. What's going on, Catherine? Asked, looking confused, the police. Station is that way, right? But Sophia's gaze remained fixated on the window, and Catherine followed it. Her curiosity growing. There behind the glass was a woman sitting on a bed wearing minimalist clothing, a simple, almost plain cropetank, and ripped, short jeans. Catherine blinked, her heart skipping a beat. The woman looked so familiar, her breath caught as she looked closer. Sophia's voice broke through her thoughts, shaky but firm. "I'm sure it's her. I saw her earlier." This is the same woman. Catherine's chest tightened as she moved closer to the window, squinting. Her pulse quickened as her eyes took in every detail of the woman. The blonde hair, the delicate features, the way she sat with an air of quiet resignation. It was CLA. It had to be. This must be her, Catherine said, her voice unsteady. "This is CLA, my daughter." Without thinking, Catherine reached out and began to knock frantically on the glass. Her hands trembling, her heart pounded as she tried to make the woman see her, make her understand. But the woman didn't seem to recognize her. She simply stared back, confusion in her eyes. Sophia looked at Catherine, her face etched with concern, but Catherine didn't stop. Her hand struck the glass again and again, each knock louder than the last. "Please," Catherine shouted, her voice cracking with desperation. "Please, it's CLA. It's my daughter, CLA. Can you hear me, darling?" Inside the window, the woman seemed increasingly uncomfortable, shifting in her bed and glancing around nervously. When Catherine knocked again, the woman stood up looking flustered. Without a word, she quickly turned and disappeared from view, her movement swift and purposeful. Moments later, a large, muscular security guard emerged from Theodore of the brothel, his face hard and impassive. He was imposing, standing nearly a foot taller than Catherine, his broad shoulders blocking the light behind him. "You need to leave," the security guard said, his voice low but firm. "This is not a place for public disturbances." Catherine's heart dropped into her stomach. "This is my daughter," she pleaded, her voice trembling with emotion. "CLA, she's missing. She's been missing for so long. She's here, I know. Please, you have to help me." The security guard remained unmoved, his eyes cold as he took a step closer, his hand already reaching for his radio. "I'm calling the police if you don't leave," he warned, his tone turning more serious. But Catherine refused to back down, her hands clenched into fists, and she stood her ground, not willing to let go of the only lead they had. Sophia stepped forward before the situation could escalate further. Shep pulled out her phone and quickly dialed the Amsterdam police, explaining the situation in rapid Dutch. Catherine the conversation, but she understood that Sophia was telling them about CLA and their location. Sophia looked up to the neon sign. "The Velvet Room," she said to the police. Catherine's heart raced, her breath shallow, as she could barely contain the anxiety that surged within her. But there was a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had finally found CLA. The tension in the air was palpable as the phone call ended. Sophia turned to Catherine, her expression calm but urgent. "The police are on their way," she said, her voice steady despite the situation. "The station's nearby. They'll be here soon." Catherine nodded, her fingers trembling. She clutched the photograph, waiting for the sound of sirens to signal relief. Just as she was about to speak, Iman emerged from the brothel, his eyes scanning the scene. He noticed the commotion. Right away, his gaze locking on Catherine and Sophia. He strode over to them with an air of authority, his expression hardening as he addressed them. "You're scaring my customer," he snapped, his tone dismissive. "And my staff. You need to leave." Catherine stiffened, her heart racing, but before she could respond, Sophia stepped forward, her voice calm yet firm. "We're looking for that woman," she said, pointing toward the window where CLA, or whoever she was, still sat, the one inside. "We believe she's the missing person. We've been searching for." Catherine's pulse quickened as she aided her. "Name is CLA. She's my daughter. Please, we need to speak to her." The man's lips twisted into a sneer as he scoffed. "Her name's not CLA," he chuckled, shaking his head. "Her name's Tracy. You're mistaken. She's not who you think she is." Sophia didn't flinch at his words. She continued to stare at him, her gaze unyielding, but Catherine's legs felt like they might give out beneath her. She had to be wrong, right? This had to be clear. But just as they were about to argue further, the distant sound of sirens reached their ears. Growing louder with each passing second, the man's demeanor shifted in an instant, his face paling as he shot a quick glance over his shoulder toward the brothel. His eyes flickered back to Catherine and Sophia, a look of panic creeping into his expression. Without another word, he dashed toward the entrance, slipping back inside, but not before grabbing the woman Tracy by the arm, pulling her toward the back door. as if he intended to flee with her. Catherine's heart pounded in her chest. "No, stop!" she cried, but the man didn't seem to hear her, his grip tightening around the woman's arm, as he pushed toward the exit before they could react. The sound of heavy boots pounding against the ground echoed in Thestrit. The police had arrived. Officers stormed into the brothel, their presence commanding Androzelut stop put. "Your hands in the air," one of them shouted as they advanced toward. The man and the woman Tracy Ao is still struggling to break free from his hold. The man froze his back to the officers. With his hands raised, he slowly turned to face them, a cocky smirk on his face. He attempted to dismiss the situation. "These women are crazy," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "This girl's name is Tracy, not Cla. They've got it all wrong. She's not missing." The officers remained impassive, their eyes narrowing. As they assessed the situation, "We'll need to see some identification on of them," said calmly, "and we'll need to speak to her as well." The man's smirk faltered in a split second. Catherine saw the flicker of fear in his eyes before anyone could react. He turned on his heel, attempting to make a run for it through the back door, but the police were quicker, one of the officers. Lungodo warned him, grabbing him by the arm before he could get more than a few feet. With a swift motion, they wrestled him. Toth ground, the sound of cuffs clicking shut. Echoing through the alley, the man was arrested in seconds, his attempt totally thwarted. Meanwhile, Catherine's eyes remained fixed on the woman. The one she believed was Cla. The woman Tracy was still standing. There, her face a mask of confusion and fear. The officers moved in quickly, speaking to her. But Catherine could barely hear. The words all she could focus on was the woman's face, searching for any sign that would confirm or deny what her heart was. Desperately hoping for Sophia stepped closer to Catherine Harhand, gently resting on her shoulder. "It's going to be okay," she murmured, but Catherine barely heard her. Her mind was consumed by the one thought that kept repeating over and over, "Is this really say?" The atmosphere outside the brothel was charged with tension as an officer led the young woman and the man out of the building. Catherine and Sophia watched as the police gathered Victor's belongings, his phone, wallet, and what looked like a taser. As they searched through his wallet, the police uncovered his ID and confirmed his identities. Victor Soph. They pushed him into a police car, talking to him in Dutch. Sophia helped translated what they said to Catherine in English. The officer said he is not on their wanted list yet, but with his last name, it seems like he is connected to a group of people they've been tracking for trafficking. They want to know how much he knows about them. Victor spat on the ground, his face twisted in anger. "I won't say anything," he muttered, his Russian accented English thick with defiance. The officer gave a sharp, Noden-phased "Leaden see about that," he said in the Dutch accented English, slamming the door of the police car shut. Victor was left to simmer in silence as the officers turned their attention back to Catherine and Sophia. One of them gently guided the woman, Clora Tracy. Catherine wasn't sure toward them. Her movements were slow and sluggish, as though she was struggling to make sense of everything around her. Her speech was slurred. Words blendingiger, her eyes glazed over in confusion. Catherine's heart twisted at the sight of her. "Cla, is that you?" Catherine's voice cracked as she asked the question, her eyes scanning Tracy's face. With a practiced intensity, she noticed how the woman's eyes, not fully focusing on her, staring blankly at the street. Sophia moved closer to her, placing a reassuring hand on her arm. Catherine's heart stopped when she noticed that Tracy's pupils were wide, her eyes shining in a way that didn't seem natural. The confusion was heavy in her gaze, and her body language screamed Thatch was only half aware of what was happening. Catherine's breath caught in her throat. She's on something," she whispered, her voice trembling. Sophia gave a grim nod in agreement. The officer stepped forward, expression grim. "You're right, ma'am. We need to get her medical attention first," he said, Histon practical yet firm. "We can't do anything until we get her sober. Otherwise, we won't be able to question her properly. It's too dangerous." Catherine gave a nod of understanding, her hand squeezing Sophia's reassuringly. "We'll get her to a clinic near the police station," one of the officer said. "It's not a full hospital, but it's equipped to handle detox and get her cleaned up." Catherine and Sophia were escorted to a police vehicle, while Tracy was taken to a separate one. The three vehicles pulled away, with the one carrying Vic off in a different direction, toward the station. The drive to the clinic was quick, the sirens cutting through the still night air as the officers kept a close eye on the woman, making sure she didn't slip any further into unconsciousness when they arrived, the medical team was already waiting, taking the woman inside with swift efficiency as Catherine and Sophia were led to the waiting area. The door closed behind them, cutting off their view off the clinic. Catherine's hands were shaking, but she tried to steady her breaths. "Is it really her?" she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "I really want to believe it's her." Sophia's gaze softened as she placed a hand on Catherine's back. "We don't know yet, but we're getting closer a few minutes." Later, an officer entered the waiting room from the clinic room. His expression, grave weave, secured her ID. Hesed, holding up a small card with a photograph. "Her name is Erin Jansen, but her street name is Tracy." He paused, glancing at the door where the medical team was working. "We've radioed the station to run her NAMA through the system. We're still waiting for an update." A wave of nausea twisted in Catherine's stomach. What if the woman wasn't CLA? She had come so far, and the thought of it all being a mistake was almost unbearable. She didn't know how she'd handle it. If this wasn't her daughter, maybe what Detective Holloway had said was right. There was a low chance this woman could actually be Clatime. Seemed to drag on in agonizing slowness. As they waited for updates from the medical team, Tracy and the station, each crackle of the police intercom sent a jolt of adrenaline through Catherine's veins. Her heart racing with hope and fear, the world seemed to tilt beneath Catherine's feet. As dispatcher greeted the officeragan, Sophia's eyes widened first as she understood what was being said in Dutch officer and Sophia. Catherine and she was felt with dread anticipation. What did they say? Shisked. Sophia, Catherine, the police, said that before she became Erin Jansen, she was known as CLA Wilson. Tracy is her street name. They've confirmed it through her ID and documentation of a birth name. Change requests from Thepis. The realization hit Catherine, her daughter, her missing daughter, was in thought room. She could feel the weight of the moment crushing down on her chest. Her breath quickened at her, heart racing as the tears welled up in her eyes. "That's her. That's Cla." Catherine's voice broke a sob, escaping her before she could. Kontanich wiped her eyes, trying to steady herself. "Can I speak to her?" "Now please." The officer exchanged a glance with Sophia, then turned back to Catherine. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we have to follow procedures. We need to make sure she's stable first and get all the information we can. Once we reach the station, we'll allow you to speak with her." Catherine wanted to argue, wanted to break through the wall of bureaucracy, seemed to separate her from her daughter, but she couldn't. Instead, she nodded, her chest heavy with grief and relief. At least she knew now that her daughter was alive, and she was just behind that door. The door to the clinic room finally opened, after a long moment of waiting and silence, and a medical staff emerged. With a relieved expression, she's regained consciousness, one of the nurses said in the foreign language, her voice calm but reassuring. The police officers exchanged glances before turning to Catherine and Sophia. Catherine stood from her seat. "Please wait here," one officer instructed, gesturing for them to remain in the clinic's waiting area. "We'll take it from here." Sophia watched as Catherine paced around the room, picking on her nails. The tension in the air, thick and heavy, both of them clinging to a fragile thread of hope. They could hear muffled voices from inside the room, but the words were indistinct. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as they waited, but the door eventually opened again. The officer who had been inside stepped out, his face grim. "She's ready," he said, gesturing for the young woman to be escorted as they led Tracy out of the room. Her eyes darted around in confusion as if trying to make sense of her surroundings. She hesitated before speaking up, her voice soft yet filled fear. "Am I in trouble?" she asked, looking down at her arms, which still showed the faint remnants of bruises. "Am I in trouble for the drugs? Where is Victor?" Catherine's heart clenched at the mention of Victor. The officer responded without hesitation, his tone firm but factual. "Victor Soph has been arrested on suspicion of human trafficking and exploitation. He's connected to a Largard group, the leader of which is Eder Soph. He won't be troubling you anymore." At the mention of his name, Tracy's eyes widened. She stood frozen, but then, as her gaze shifted, she locked eyes with Catherine. Her voice faltered as she whispered, "Mom, is that you?" Catherine's breath hitched, tears welling in her eyes. She could hardly believe it after all these years, after all the heartache. Her daughter was standing before her and recognized her. A tremble ran through her as she nodded, her voice thick with emotion.
"Yeah."
"Yes, Claire, it's me. Catherine, I've missed you." Without another word, Claire Rushadinto, Catherine's arms pulling her into a tight embrace, Catherine held her daughter with all the love and relief she had been storing up for so long. "I'm so glad to see you." Catherine whispered, her voice breaking. "I never gave up, never the officers witnessing the emotional reunion. Gently guided the two women apart, their voices soft, but firm. "Sorry, I hate to disrupt the reunion, but we need to get moving. We'll continue at the station," one of them said. Catherine nodded, holding her daughter's hand tightly and never letting go. As they were guided outside, she only released it when they entered separate police vehicles, Catherine and Sophia in one and Thracia in another, before they all made their way to the station. When they arrived, they were led into an interview room, and Catherine could barely contain her emotions as she looked at her daughter, who had sat down, still dazed, but now more alert. "I thought I'd never see you again, CLA," said her voice cracking. "I thought I had given up on you, Mom, that I would never get out of this nightmare." Catherine's heart shattered at their daughter's words, but she gently cued Ciella's face. "I searched for you every day, posters, the internet. I never stopped looking, never." CLA nodded slowly, her eyes filled with sorrow as she began to piece together her story. "It was all so fast," she began, her voice more stable, now though still tinged with fear. "I was taken on Carassa when we were on that cruise. Dad saw me. He chased after Decker, caught up just as it stopped in some alley. He tried to fight them off, but they overpowered him. There were 6 of them. They made him get in the car too. They took us to this warehouse. And he fought so hard to protect me, but they beat him, tortured him, and they killed him." Catherine's breath caught in her throat, her face pale with guilt and heartbreak. She had wondered, doubted even whether her husband might have been involved, but to hear CLA recount it in such painful detail shattered her world. "They drugged me," Claire continued, her voice empty and distant. "When I woke up, I had no idea where I was. I was just surrounded by men in black clothes, and there were other women too, in the room, all scared and crying. There were like 10 or 11 of us, maybe more. I can't even remember how many. It's all just a blur now." The pain in Catherine's chest intensified as CLA spoke, her voice faltering with each passing word. "The first 5 years were the hardest," CLA said softly. They broke me. I was a model first, then a dancer in nightclubs. They sold me to many men like Victor. I can't remember much of those years. Iggs, always drugged, always under their control." The officers listened attentively, typing her words into the system as CLA spoke, her eyes, vacant as, relived those horrors. Catherine fought back the tears, but they came anyway. Her daughter had endured so much, and the guilt and sadness threatened to overwhelm her. The police nodded solemnly, absorbing the weight of her words, although relieved to have found her. "The situation remained heartbreaking. We'll need to conduct a DNA test," one officer said, his voice firm. "We'll also reach out to authorities in Orlando, and immigration matters will be said Toro. Also, further questioning will be necessary. Claire may be able to provide valuable information about Theother women or the men involved in the trafficking activities. We hope you'll be willing to cooperate with us," the officer said, his tone encouraging yet serious. Catherine and Claire both nodded. Through it of the moment sinking in, Sophia, who had been silently supportive throughout the exchange, turned to Chloe a warm smile. "I'm glad you two found each other again," she said. "I'm just glad to see you reunited." Catherine glanced at Sophia, her gratitude impossible to put into words. "You saved her, Sophia. You found her and brought her back to me. I can never repay you for that. I owe you a lifetime." Sophia looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. "You don't owe me anything. You're a mother who never gave up. That's what matters. You kept fighting." Catherine, as the DNA samples were carefully collected, the officers discussed their next steps, how Klaus' information would be processed, how they would begin the work of dismantling the trafficking ring that had held her captive for so long, and assured them that they would do everything they could to expedite the processing. That quietment. Catherine's mind wandered. She thought of all the years that had been stolen from her family, the grief she'd carried, the emptiness she'd felt. But now, for the first time, she could see a future with CLA. She squeezed Sophia's hand again, grateful for the support, the friendship, the unwavering strength. And as they stepped out of Theophile's room, ready to face the next part of the journey, Catherine's heart was lighter than it had been in years as they moved through the legal proceedings. Catherine came to understand that the path to recovery would be long and fraught with obstacles, but it would be worth every step they would face it together. The weight of the years of pain might never fully lift, but they would find a way forward. Together they would confront the scars, the trauma, and the addiction. As they worked toward healing, didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope, a hope thought. Her daughter, after all she had endured, would eventually find her way to recovery with CLA by her side. Catherine Akunu, they could face whatever came next. They had already endured the worst, and they wouldn't stop now.